Alright guys, so today we're going to talk about two new rebalances that are coming with the next patch, and both of those champions are going to be Force champions, and you might be surprised, but when we talk about Force champions, there's only one that pops up in my mind, and this guy is waiting for a buff since 1684 or something, but yeah, I don't think we're going to see a buff for this guy anytime soon, unfortunately, but I'm gonna bring him up every time we see new rebalances because this is hilarious, okay? 7-turn cooldown can be booked down to a 6-turn cooldown. I'm gonna repeat myself every single video, but that's okay because it is the truth. This guy deserves a buff, okay? Please, Plarium, by the love of God, give him something, okay? Reduce this cooldown at least, okay? Please do it, okay? Now, let's get to the actual rebalances. And the first one we're going to talk about is Robar from the Orcs. So, Plarium is saying this about Robar. We continue to work our way through the Orcs faction, and Robar is the next in line for his 2026 makeover. This veteran champion hasn't seen a light of day for a while now, so today we're introducing changes that will help him to take on Faction Wars. Faster than ever, armed with new empowering buffs, true fear debuff, and a shiny new passive, Robar is ready to crush it alongside his fellow orcs. Okay, so let's take a look at what he can do now. I have not seen it yet, so let's see. So his A1 is not going to be changed at all. Let's actually take a look at his A1 first before we read the changes. Where is he at? There he is. I do have him. So this is the A1. Stunning Strength. Attacks one enemy, has a 50% chance of placing a stun debuff for 1 turn. Grants an extra turn if this debuff is successfully placed. Okay, so that is the A1. All right, so let's take a look at this rebalance. So here we go. His A2 before attacks all enemies. Each hit has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. Can be probably booked up to 100% chance. So after the rebalance, it's still an AoE attack, but before attacking, he will place a 50% increase accuracy buff, which is good. That means you don't need to build the full accuracy. You can build half of it, and with the increased accuracy buff, still be able to place a debuff and a 50% increase attack buff on this champion for 2 turns, which is insanely good because now you don't need to bring increased attack. He's self-buffing and pushing his own damage. He has a 75% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense debuff and a true fear debuff, okay, for 2 turns. So this A2 is incredibly better now compared to before, where it only was a one-liner. That's pretty good. Okay. Now I wonder if, theoretically, if you would use him on Chimera, for example, if you would place the True Fear and then deal damage, or deal damage and then place the True Fear, but it sounds more like he would deal it after the hit, right? He would debuff after the hit. That's what it sounds like to me. So yeah, so far so good, okay? The A3 attacks all enemies. This is before. The damage increases if the target is under Fear, True Fear, Freeze, Provoke, Sleep, Stun, Petrification. Okay, so, you know, just not enough for today's mechanics or the way the champions are today. Seems like most of the epics, the newer epics, do more than he did before, right? So after the rebalance, this is what the A3 is going to look like. Attacks all enemies, so still an AoE attack, and will ignore 20% of each target's defense and shield buffs. Okay, so he will ignore shield and 20% defense, which is amazing. Okay, if you put him in a Merciless set, 6-piece Merciless, he's at 55% def ignore. Then you slap a Cat's Gaze on him. You know, you can hit the 70% def ignore easily, and then maybe with a 6-star solo crushing rant, you will hit 100% def ignore with this skill. Pretty insane if you ask me. Okay, so this hopefully will deal a lot more damage now, and it theoretically should. Now the damage increases if the target is under fear, true fear, and so on. Okay, so if you have any crowd control debuff on any of the targets, the damage increases. Now the question is by how much? I have no idea. Okay, so I don't know how that will scale, but I know that when Robar, in like 2019, 2020, he was actually able to deal a good amount of damage. Okay, so I assume that he will still be able to do that. Okay, I don't think his multipliers are a problem. Let me actually look up the multipliers. So Robar has a 3.4 multiplier on the A1, 4.3 on the A2, and 4.2 on the A3. As I said, those multipliers are not bad at all, but also nothing that is insane. Okay, so they're pretty average, I would say. Now his passive fills this champion's turn meter by 15% whenever a fear, true fear, freeze, provoke, sleep, or stun is placed on an ally, excluding this champion. Fills all allies' turn meter by 15% whenever this champion places a stun debuff on an enemy. Counterattacks with the stunning strength skill whenever an ally from the Orcs faction is attacked, occurs once per turn. So basically, he will function as a stun bot kind of in Faction Wars. Okay, so if you have a lot of Orcs in your team, which is exactly what is happening in Faction Wars, he will counterattack with his A1, which, keep in mind, is this one, stunning strength, and it has a 50% chance to stun, okay? And it will grant an extra turn, and I assume it will proc on this when he counterattacks. Not so sure if it does, but I'm assuming it does. So he will get an extra turn, okay? And that would be actually pretty nuts. But yeah. So the passive, pretty good. I can see what they meant when they said they want to improve him for Faction Wars. And that's where I think that he will shine, okay? Maybe also Orc Siege posts, but the competition is very high there. You have the Unity, you have Garrow, so yeah, I don't know, okay? But overall, solid rebalance, I would say. Will he be groundbreaking, game-changing? I don't think so, okay? But maybe he will be useful for some people and help in Faction Wars, because right now, not so much. His aura will also be improved from 50 accuracy to 80 in faction crypts, and his base speed from 97 to 102 will also help a little bit. So, like I said, overall, solid rebalance, nothing game-changing or, game-breaking, which is okay, right? We don't need champions that break the game, so I think this will definitely help a lot of people that are lacking orcs, for example, okay? For example, me, I don't have a lot of orcs, and I didn't have a lot of orcs for a long time. It's kind of like my weakest faction, but it's also one of the weaker factions in general. So yeah, I like to see this. Okay, fair enough. Orcs definitely need some more love, and yeah, this is a good rebalance. Let's move on to the next one, and that is also pretty interesting. I actually forgot about this champion, to be honest, that this champion actually still exists, and it is Abbess, okay? And one thing that I noticed is that her in-game graphics don't look like her avatar at all. Like, for example, if you look at Glazea, it looks like 1-to-1, or Wixwell. You can definitely see, the similarities here. It's the same person, but for Abbess, for some reason, what is his face? Like, I don't know what happened here, but that doesn't look anything like that avatar at all. But yeah, so that's the next champion we're gonna get a rebalance for, and this is what Plarium had in mind. So speaking of veteran champions, Abbess is another figure from Raid's earliest days who was falling short of her potential. In 2026, not having a passive skill is a major drawback in itself. That's 100% facts. Most of the epics have passives nowadays. So we've given her a simple yet effective new passive while also revamping the rest of her kit to boost her overall damage output and debuff efficiency so you can focus more on building her with offensive stats. Additionally, the damage increase and def ignore on her A3 was reworked, making it easier to fulfill the conditions. All right. And now let's take a look at the actual rework, and here it is. So her A1, let me actually double check if that is her, yeah, that's her A1. Before attacks one enemy, removes one random debuff from this champion and places it on the target. Okay. So we're gonna keep the same line on the rework, but then it has a 100% chance of stealing one random buff from the target, and the damage multiplier is increased. Okay, so we remove a debuff, transfer it on the target, and steal one buff. Okay, pretty straightforward, not a crazy A1, but overall solid. Okay. I wonder how much the damage multiplier will be increased. The A2 attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance of placing a decreased defense debuff for 2 turns. This can be booked up to 100%, I'm pretty sure. Let's double check real quick. But I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah, 100% and 3 turn cooldown, okay? Now, after the rework, it's still an AoE attack, but it's going to place a decreased defense before you attack, okay? So that means you will deal a lot more damage. Also, on top of that, you will ignore 15% of each target's defense and shield buffs. Grants an extra turn if this attack kills an enemy. Pretty nice. I can also see this working in PvE wave content, right? You place a decreased defense, you ignore defense, you deal more damage. Sounds good, okay? You get an extra turn if you kill anything. That's pretty nice. Let's take a look at the A3. So we're just gonna read the ascended skill part here, because that's what you unlock when you ascend her to 6, right? Or when you fully ascend her, or I think when you ascend her 3 times, right? So before attacks all enemies, damage inflicted is proportional to either its champion's attack or the target's defense or attack stat, whichever is the highest. Deals an extra 30% crit damage if the target's attack is highest. Will ignore 30% of the target's defense if the target's defense is highest. All right, so that was before. Now let's read after the rebalance. Still an AoE attack. Before attacking, you place a 50% increase attack buff on this champion for 2 turns, which is amazing. Same thing as on Robar, and I feel like they took the same approach here. Now, before you are attacking, you're placing those buffs and debuffs, and therefore you are dealing more damage, and you are amplifying your attack. Will ignore 15% of each target's defense, so straight up 15% def ignore. Will ignore 30% of each target's defense instead if this champion's attack is greater than the target's defense, which will probably most of the time be the case because you have increased attack, and then you also have an attack type champion, right? So you will try to stack attack, okay? And unless you are facing a Chimera on Ultra Nightmare, which has, an insane amount of defense, I think you will unlock this condition, okay? And then it will also ignore unkillable buffs. The damage multiplier is increased. Okay, so straight up 15% def ignore, self-buffing now, places decreased defense before attacking. Very solid, and you ignore unkillable. I like it. For PvE, for wave content, this is a nice rebalance again. Now the passive, which she didn't have at all, kind of crazy if you think about it, will ignore 25% of each target's resistance if this champion's attack is greater than the target's attack. increases this champion's attack by 5% for each buff received or stolen, stacks up to 50%. Wow, so she can actually ramp up damage. That is amazing. So for longer fights, for wave content, as I said, faction wars, stuff like that, I don't really think she will be that useful in Chimera. Maybe for Hydra, she can deal damage or, a good amount of damage, but I don't think she will be at the top. But yeah, I can definitely see her being good in like I said, wave content, faction wars, and I think that's what they want those champions to be, right? Like a help for those faction wars, waves and stuff. Yeah, overall pretty nice. And then her attack aura will also be increased from 34 to 40% attack in faction crypts. Okay, so yeah. Overall, I think those rebalances are okay. Nothing that I personally get too excited about, but I think they definitely gonna help a lot of people, those rebalances, and maybe they will become viable for some accounts, to use in faction wars. Orcs faction wars is pretty hard actually if you don't have, the dog and Shayak, for example. It's pretty hard to do unless you have Garrow, right? It's kind of like the biggest carry there. And then Sacred Order, you have Noels or Nicholas. Those are kind of like my biggest carries there. Siegfried, obviously. But if you don't have those, this can be hard as well. So, yeah, I like to see it, But like I said, nothing too crazy. But okay, we don't need every champion to be insane, right? We don't need every champion to be a Tecteon or something like that. That would be absolutely boring, in my opinion. But yeah. And that's about it for this video, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think about these rebalances. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you enjoyed this video, YouTube's going to think that you like this one as well. Take care and see you in the next one.